The undead are some of my favourite miniatures to paint, which means I've dealt with my fair share of bone. And today on the Hobby Grotto, I'm going to show you exactly how I paint bone as simply and efficiently as possible. One of the keys to painting bone is a good base to work up from, and an ochre brown like this is going to be perfect. I'm using XV88 from the Citadel range here, but all brands are going to have an equivalent colour. I'm doing an overbrush here, which is a heavy dry brush, and this is going to give our bone the tone it needs while also leaving that black undercoat in the deepest recesses for shading. This miniature in particular also highlights another common side of painting bone, and that is spindly limbs. So when doing something vigorous like dry brushing, it's always good to brace these parts of the mini. Dry brushing really goes hand in hand with painting bone. These kinds of miniatures often have a lot of details that benefit from the contrast you can create with dry brushing. And also the act itself leaves some nice textured looking blended colours as you work up, which again is really good for organic stuff like bone. Once that's done, I'm coming back with a standard dry brush of bone, and you ideally want to build this up over a few layers so it doesn't look too stark. All paint has a level of transparency, and the previous brown base coat is really going to work here to show through and fill out this bone. If you just go straight over black with a bone dry brush, it can often look too cold and abrupt. The brown undertone gives us this nice blend. I'm using the same kind of cheap art store brush here with all the dry brushing. I use all kinds of dry brushes really, often old brushes from other tasks, but I like this kind of size and shape when doing large parts of the model. It's not too broad in tip like some makeup brushes, so you can still do a bit of precise stuff. I've been thinking of making a video on different kinds of dry brushes, so let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see. Now you have two really solid options for shading bone in black and brown washes, and it's really going to depend on the style you want for your minis. I personally prefer black wash because I like the additional contrast it creates, but a more dirty, dingy looking bone with brown can also look incredibly cool. The best thing to do is experiment yourself on a test model and see what you're most happy with. You can even just paint it on a small inconspicuous part of the mini and go over it with another colour later if you change your mind. Nobody will ever notice, and this is something I like to do when testing stuff out. Once that's all dry, you're pretty much already at a good tabletop standard, particularly if you have to paint a lot of bone. If you want to leave it there, you could come back with a light dry brush of bone all over to bring out some more contrast, but I'm going to show you how to push the highlights further now with some brush work. I'm highlighting everything with Ushabti bone here, and if you want a darker bone, you can just concentrate this to the raised areas and focal points of your mini, or you could really go to town with it and get a more bright sun-bleached bone. The most important thing here is keeping the paint nice and thin so we don't cover up too much of the shade we've achieved with the dry brushing. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. That stuff helps so much with getting the Hobby Grotto out there. And let me know as well what kind of projects you're working on with these tutorials. I'm always interested in talking hobby. I'm continuing with the highlighting here, and while you can skip this step and go straight to pure white highlights, I think they can be a bit stark sometimes, so I like to come back and add this 50-50 mix of bone and white to all the focal points. Particularly hands, shoulders, and faces can be good places to concentrate on, but it's really going to depend on the model, of course. If any of this ever looks too bright, you can come back with bone and tone the highlights down. I think people forget sometimes that you can go back if you've gotten a bit carried away. Just bring out some of those previous colours from your wet palette and you'll be good to go. And finally, some pure white can be added to take the highlights to their maximum level. You can't go much further than white. Again, I think this is a pretty optional step. Bone really does look good with just some dry brushing and washes at the end of the day, but if you take your time, you can get some really great results with edge and point highlights like this. You've got pure black in the deepest recesses and pure white at the highest points, which is just awesome contrast for making tabletop minis pop. So that's how you paint bone. Of course, there are lots of different ways to do it, but I hope you enjoyed my take, and we'll see you next time on the Hobby Grotto.